This is my 1949 Studebaker 2R5 half-ton pickup truck that me and my sister are in the process of restoring. And today I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about the disassembly of the pickup bed. I first wanted to talk about the removal of the rear fender, as you see right here. There were multiple mounting points, and specifically there were 7 studs in the pickup bed that the fender was mounted onto. Here you can see the studs. There's 5 along the top, and then there were 2 more down the sides. I was able to save some of the studs, some of the ones I weren't able to. But as you take a look at the actual fender, you can see the mounting points on the fender. You can see the 5 points on the top there that were mounted to those studs on the fender along the way. In this case, you can see 3 of the studs were still there. There were some mounting points on the rear that were a bolt nut combination, and then on the front we also had another couple of bolt combinations. But I really wanted you to take a look at the mounting points on the fender, and you can see that some actually matched up with the holes on the bedside itself, but in some cases there were not holes that matched up. And as you can see here, I have 2 holes here, but there was a 3rd mounting point, that one right there, that actually mounted to the fender using a large flat washer, which looked just like this one that I removed from the fender. You also had a long support bracket on the back and one on the front that connected to the bedside and the fenders to provide support. Overall, this is what it took to remove this fender. I next wanted to take a look at disassembly of this front end panel on the pickup bed. It is actually connected by 2 bolts and nuts here on the driver's side. You can see them right there, the end panel to the side of the bed. And then as you move to the top there, you can see where the end panel is actually welded to the bed here at the top. And then as you look down the side of the bed, you can see where the end panel is connected to the pickup bed sides. And in this case, as I discovered, it's connected by spot welding, which are pretty tough. Moving on to the other side, looking down inside there, the end panel again is connected to the side of the bed through spot welds. And then as you move up to the top, you see the other weld between the panel and the pickup bed side. And then moving outside, you can see where on the passenger side there's also 2 bolts connecting the end panel to the pickup bed side. And lastly, when you look down underneath there, you can see where the end panel is actually connected to the pickup bed support brace on the front. It goes all the way across there, and this in itself also was connected by spot welding. And as you can see, it goes all the way across from one side to the other. It actually took several variations of tools to remove this end panel. The first one was this cutting wheel with a 4.5-inch cutting blade that I used to cut through welds and some of the spot welds. Secondly, I had this Sawzall with a metal cutting blade that proved useful in cutting through the bed floor itself. And then lastly, I had these chisels. A small chisel worked well on cutting through individual spot welds, and then I had a wider blade chisel here that worked well on separating multiple spot welds at the same time. And then lastly, I had my little pawl peen hammer to help with the process. To remove the end panel, I first cut the 2 bolts holding the panel to the bed sides on both sides here. And then the next thing I wanted to do was to cut through the weld here at the top where the panel was connected to the bed side. And the tool of choice that I used for that was my cutting wheel, which I used just like this to cut straight through the weld. And then I created that separation. For the passenger side, I was fortunate that I was able to take my small chisel and on the back side there create a separation between that end panel and the bed side. And then I was able to take my wider chisel and use that to cut through and separate completely the panel from the bed side. As a result, I was able to determine that the panel and bed side were actually connected together by a series of spot welds that weren't evident when I started this process. That really helped me because as I moved over to the driver's side and started removing that, I first cut through the weld at the top, and then when I tried to use my chisel, I couldn't create any separation on the inside. And so then I went to my Sawzall with the metal cutting blade. Then I used that to cut down between the panel and the bedside itself. cutting through each and every one of those spot welds. The bottom of the panel was connected to the pickup bed itself and also to the bed support cross member. In order to make this happen, I actually ended up using my Sawzall just to cut the bed away from the end panel, up next to the end panel, as you can see right here. And that allowed me to create a space to further separate the end panel from that bed support cross member down below there. This is what it looks like once I got it all apart there. You can see how I cut through the bottom there. This is where I cut through the spot welds on both sides there. And this is the process I use to separate the end panel. To remove the tailgate, you have two hinge points on the lower part of the tailgate that you need to remove. They mount with two bolts. This is exactly what the hinge looks like. You can see the two bolt holes there, and then you can also see the nipple that the tailgate slides up on and rotates on that. You have one of these on both sides of the tailgate, and then at the top of the tailgate you have a chain that secures the tailgate to the bedside. So simply remove the two bolts on each side and then remove the tailgate from there, and that's all it takes. This is one of the bed support brackets here. You can see it's got the little lips there that hook onto the bed on the sides, and then the bed itself is spot welded to this bracket, and basically everywhere the bed touched the bracket there's basically 3 spot welds. I was trying to break them free, but it didn't work too well. And since I know I'm not saving for the bed, I just went ahead and cut this out. There were welds here on the end. I cut off the welds on the end and around this lip here. And when I did all that, that was able to break free from there. I needed to remove this rear skirt, also called the rear balance panel, on just underneath the tailgate. I first cut it off on both ends there, and then I got my small chisel and I used it to knock out a few of the spot welds between this panel and the bed support cross member. What this allowed was for me to create a gap that would allow me to then take my Sawzall, slide up in that gap, and then to cut out all of the spot welds to remove this panel. I pretty much got it cut off here, but I stopped so I can get a clamp to hold it until I finish cutting it. But that's pretty much the process for removing this rear valance panel. These are the pickup bed sides that I was able to save. This is the floor panels of the pickup bed that I cut out and I'm not going to use. These are the slivers of the floor that were on the bed support cross members. And those 3 holes are the spot welds that were connecting the floor of the bed to these cross members. This cross member is the one underneath the tailgate, and as you can see it has the 3 spot welds anytime the floor of the bed touched it. They are just about 1/4 of an inch in diameter and they are extremely tough to cut. The intermediate support brackets here you can see with the tabs there that are welded to the bedside, and then on each of the members you can see where the floor of the bed touches it. It's spot welded in 3 places, and then on the right there you can see those 2 tabs that were also welded to the bed sides. This cross member was underneath the front end panel and is really too rusted to use, and so we won't use this in our restoration process. Here are the tools that I used to disassemble this pickup bed. On the left there you can see my cutting wheel. And then beside that, the 3 different chisels that I used to help separate the spot welds. I got a couple of ball peen hammers, and then I have my Sawzall there with the metal cutting blade. And then at the top there I have my face shield, which I found was important because cutting with that Sawzall I had a lot of slivers flying around, and the face shield was pretty handy in making sure I didn't get anything in my eyes. So please make sure you have that. Hopefully this helps, and thank you very much. Bye.